Hello, my name is Nick Furlo. Today I'm here to present online dating as context to design sexual consent technology. Sexual experience is mediated by computers in many ways. Perhaps the most crucial element of sexual experience that computers can mediate is the exchange of consent or agreement to sexual activity, because the absence of consent is the defining characteristic of sexual violence, meaning sexual acts that are committed or attempted by another person without freely given consent of the victim. Sexual violence does not necessitate physical force, as the term may imply. It often occurs without intent to cause harm or recognition by the victim that harm has occurred. This is due to problematic consent exchange practices, which are how one gives and perceives to receive consent, such as interpreting consent through ambiguous nonverbal cues, through sexual scripts that challenge one's perceptions of sexual agency, which is the right to decline sex. We argue that design of computer-mediated consent to sex needs to be addressed in light of the evidence that current consent technology actually perpetuate rather than prevent sexual violence. Controversial consent apps that allow users to record but not revoke consent to sex have been criticized for subverting sexual agency, which is, what if your partner changes their mind during sex and no longer wants to participate? Dating apps have also inadvertently become consent technologies that scaffold harmful consent practices and sexual scripts. While researchers within HCI have considered consent as an important aspect of computer-mediated sexual well-being, there is an absence of user involvement in consent technology design, particularly from stakeholders most at risk of sexual violence. Research questions driving our work include: what should sexual consent technology do, or what should it mean to mediate consent to sex? Where and when should sexual consent technology be used, and what type of devices or applications could be designed into sexual consent technology? We conducted an IRP-approved participatory design study with 17 online daters in the United States to generate new conceptual designs for sexual consent technology. Online dating was used as the backdrop in design sessions because of the normativity of using social computing platforms for discovery and interacting with potential sexual partners, therefore posing ample opportunities across an online to offline timeline for participants to consider consent technology intervention. Because we're using consent mediation as a lens towards sexual violence mitigation, we chose to recruit stakeholders who identify as LGBTQIA+ and/or women, because these demographics are disproportionately victims of sexual violence. Please refer to the paper for further demographic details. Participants described their preferred practices for exchanging consent in order to stimulate discussions of the consent practices that technology should mediate. Then we showed a visual timeline of an online dating process to exemplify the range of intervention points for new consent technology. This process comprised the discovery of potential sexual partners online, to interacting with a partner online, to meeting a partner face-to-face, to physical sexual activity occurring. Participants worked in groups of 2 to 3 to design new ways that technology could support the adoption of their consent practices anywhere in the timeline and with any device or application that they imagined. The designs varied between written, drawn, and verbal ideas. After the first design exercise, the whole group convened to share and discuss ideas, which involved modifications and remixes of the original designs, as well as new designs. Afterwards, participants split into small groups again to generate designs for consent technology 10 years in the future in order to inform long-term design agendas and remove creativity constraints around what participants thought was technologically possible. Getting into the findings, our participants advocated for a sexual consent technology that would work to normalize unambiguous consent throughout the entire process, from first online interaction to meeting face-to-face to having physical sex in person. They also wanted this technology to help them with recurrent consent exchange between their sexual partner during sexual acts, as well as promoting these transparent discourse and dialogues about sexual expectations, boundaries, consent, and preferences. So our first design theme is that consent technology that initiates and maintains transparent dialogue about sex across online and offline interactions. So our participants wanted consent technology to help them in their interactions with other users online. One example was that they wanted a AI to provide prompts for conversations with their matched partners, and they wanted these prompts to kind of slowly progress the conversation naturally more towards these sensitive topics about sex boundaries and sexual preferences and consent. And they wanted this because they believed that it would help alleviate some of the awkwardness involved in bringing up some of these sensitive topics, but also to ensure that these conversations are taking place. Our second design theme is that consent exchange as an interface design pattern to ensure mutual comfort with transparent disclosures about sexual expectations and experiences. So our participants advocated for these designs for consent technology to create a comfortable environment so that all users feel as though it is safe for them to discuss these sensitive and very personal and intimate topics, such as their sexual preferences and boundaries, and that the creating this comfortable environment where both users feel comfortable discussing these is absolutely paramount because of the social taboos in place that make these conversations sometimes uncomfortable for some people. So our participants really advocated for making these systems as comfortable to use, whether that is from a system that works like Discord, where you have different channels about different conversation topics, or whether there's certain profile content that you want to give permission to view in order to make you feel more comfortable that not everyone can see it. So our third design theme is supplementing verbal consent with machine translation of sexual discomfort. This was something that our participants advocated for a lot, which was they wanted the technology to also be involved in the during the actual acts. And so one way this was envisioned was a robot companion that follows you around and helps communicate things between partners about when people feel uncomfortable, or if something is going south, they could step in. Another envisioned solution for this was a wearable light that could emit different colors based on how the user was feeling in that moment. And so, for example, if you were feeling uncomfortable, maybe it would flash red. If you were enjoying yourself, it would flash green. And they specifically wanted these technologies not to replace verbal consent, but to augment this and to supply more information. They believed that, especially with the light wearable idea, that it could transmit information faster than their partner verbally could, which would allow them to have more information sooner in order to stop making their partner uncomfortable, in order to avoid unwanted situations. So now let's talk about some design guidelines for designing consent technology. So our first presented guideline here is that consent technology should normalize, not replace, verbal exchange of consent. So unlike consent apps, consent technology should work to make these types of conversations and exchanges of consent normal and comfortable. Affirmative consent technology should prioritize comfort. So again, we need to create a comfortable environment for the users in order for them to feel comfortable giving these types of conversations a go with people who they don't know very well. There's another paper here that you can take a look at as well that will give you some more information about that and back up some of what I'm saying here. Consent technology should intervene before situations where sex occurs. This is also very important. The consent technology should not intervene right before sex is about to occur or during. It should intervene much before that in order to scaffold this process and mediate this for the user to help them to ensure they have a good experience. We also had some concerns with our method when we first began. We wanted to understand what type of sexual situation should these stakeholders design for, how should they design for a particular consent model, and these were all things that we had to take a lot of consideration into while designing the study, and I will defer to the text for more information on how we made our decisions about these things, as it's a bit more nuanced than we have time for, but I definitely I recommend looking into that for anyone who is interested in learning more about what we learned from our participatory design study. And finally, thank you so much for watching. This material is based upon work partially supported by the U.S. National Science Foundation under grant number IIS 2211896. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.